Hey again, RecTechies. Welcome to the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. Recruiting technology is the key to hiring great talent, and that's why this show exists. Today's episode is a vendor edition. Today's episode is sponsored by Rejobify, the rejection email service. If you care about the candidate experience, then why aren't you rejecting candidates the right way? Rejobify helps you soften the blow among those you can't hire by giving them access to job search advice and resources right from their rejection email embedded into your current ATS. Don't just reject candidates, Rejobify them. Go to rejobify.com and schedule your demo today. All right, Stephen Rothberg is the founder of collegerecruiter.com, a longtime recruitment platform for college students and recent grads, and he joins me now on the show. Hey, Stephen, good to see you again.
Great to see you too, Chris.
All right, so what's new in the world of college recruiting these days? Are we seeing a slowdown, uptick? What's from your perspective, what's happening?
I think the best way to describe it is a shift. Until the 2019-2020 school year, college recruiting looked very much like it did in 1952. You had the vast majority of students, typically in the US, what we call juniors, most of the world, we call them third-year students in a four-year degree, being interviewed on campus in little tiny interview rooms, maybe off of the campus library or career service office or something like that, by Fortune 1000 companies. The vast majority of students went to work for very large organizations. And when COVID hit, it hit in the US and most of the world after that university year's recruiting cycle was pretty much finished. It started to hit in some areas of the world in like a little bit in January. February was, we started to see lockdowns in Italy and places like that. And the US by mid-March, that's when it really turned our world upside down. But by that point, college recruiting was done for the year. So the next year, the 2021 school year, there was almost no traditional college recruiting. Almost all of those employers that still wanted to hire interns, hire people who were just about to graduate or who had just graduated, they were forced to realize that, hey, it's the 2000s and maybe our recruitment practices, policies, tools, procedures should be updated from where they had been in 1952. And that's what happened. So they turned to job boards, they turned to online hiring events, online career fairs. They turned to sourcing tools like LinkedIn, et cetera, just like they would with just about any other kind of recruitment. And lo and behold, they found that they could hire the people that they wanted to far faster and for far less money. So flash forward to this coming year, what we're hearing at College Recruiter is that the same organizations that were recruiting on campus in 2019 pretty much are going back to campus for this coming school year, but they're not doing it the same way. Instead of trying to hire pretty much 100% of the students and recent grads through on-campus recruiting, it now might be half or 60% or 40%. And so they're adopting more of a hybrid recruiting model. I think what that's going to help them see again for the third time in 3 years is that recruiting online allows them to reach a much more diverse audience far faster, hire them faster, and cost a lot less. And I think that you're going to see less and less on-campus recruitment and more online recruitment. I'm obviously biased because those dollars that go online and away from on campus, some of those come to us.
Yeah. What are you seeing in terms of trends for just industries, hiring, maybe some new stuff coming on? Just give me some general thoughts on that.
So there's this narrative that students want to work either fully remote or fully in person or just gig jobs. And again, the reality is it can be true on a student by student basis, but overall, students, recent grads, typically people who are early in their careers, they want the same things that the rest of us want. And you and I love working remotely. But we also have plenty of friends who could not work remotely, right? They don't have the right personality. They don't have the right home setup. They're not in the right profession, kind of hard to be a nurse working from home, things like that. And it's the same thing with students and grads. So that a lot of the surveys that you see out there with the clickbait headlines make it look like all students want to return to fully in-person work. And it's really not true. I think the reality is that most of the early careers want to have a hybrid approach. They want to work some days in the office. They want to work some days at home. It might be 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or 1 and 4, or something along those lines. It might be 1 week in the office and then 1 week home, and just sort of alternate like that. But one of the problems that somebody early in their career has that people like you and I who have decades of experience just don't have is that they need more coaching. They need more management. They need
to be
more
in the office
mentoring.
more. Yeah.
They need to be in the office more, or they need to have a manager who's highly skilled at management. So like at College Recruiter, we've been fully remote since 1997. We've hired successfully, trained successfully, and retained successfully many people who were early in their careers. It takes a much higher degree of skill by the manager in order to do that. You have to be much more deliberate, planful, outcomes oriented than just, does the person show up at 8 and leave at 5? You have to have a plan. You have to be measuring by numbers. You have to be conscious of the fact that it's not about how many hours somebody puts into writing a memo or a report. It's about the quality of that report. How are you going to evaluate that? And how do you communicate that to your hire, to your employee? And that is beyond the skill level, quite frankly, of many and perhaps most managers. I think it's one of the reasons why so many employers have been pushing for a return to in-person, is because the skill level of their management is not where it needs to be in order to have everybody be fully remote. And hey, if that's just the reality in your workplace, just own it, right? Just be realistic. We manage a lot better when people are in person. Fair enough. But don't pretend that the candidates want it. It's on the managers. It's not on the employees.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you allow gig jobs on your platform, Stephen?
We do. And gig jobs in and of themselves are really not new. When you and I were young adults, I think Abraham Lincoln was president at that point. But we used to call those contractor 1099 jobs. There are plenty of them, and there were plenty that were absolutely high quality. There was nothing inherently wrong with them. And it's just easier to find gig work now. There are a lot more of them. There are a lot more that are very flexible, part-time, whatever. There are definitely some college career service offices that refuse to run gig jobs. And I think that's a huge mistake. I can understand why a 4-year school that like Worcester Polytechnic Institute, for example, is basically a business and engineering school near Boston. And I can certainly understand why a school like that might say our students are not interested in driving for Uber. And so they wouldn't allow those sorts of gig jobs on their platforms. But that career service office is doing, I think, a disservice to their students, because some of those students do want to work for Uber part-time to reduce their debt, to help pay for rent, to have pizza money on the weekends. It doesn't have to be a career-related job for a student to be interested, or for that job to be of quality.
Yeah, it's kind of becomes the new entry-level job almost, right? You could basically, my daughter she came from college this year, and she signed up for a dog walking service, right? She did a few of those gigs before she found her restaurant job.
Yeah, what's your daughter's career path? What is she looking to go into?
She's in like digital communication, so she's kind of into video and photography now. Yeah.
So I know we're both preaching to the choir here, but how is dog walking any more or less career related than working in a restaurant or lifeguarding or other jobs that a lot of students traditionally would have done. It's not. So, hey, if she can jump online and say, hey, I'm available Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning, and she gets a few gigs from that, fantastic.
Yep, definitely. Give me a sense of college recruiting. You've been around for a long time. I think when did you start the site?
Well, I started the company in 91 and College Recruiter kind of morphed out of it. It was sort of a almost like a side business, like sort of sizzle that would help sell the steak. We were doing things like employment magazines. And then the magazines gradually migrated online, and then that took over the business. But the first version of our website went live in 96.
So give the audience a sense of kind of how big you are today, and then talk about your pricing model as well, because it's kind of unique.
Sure. So we at College Recruiter, one thing that might be helpful to your listeners to know is that we're not set up like Handshake. We're more like an Indeed. So Handshake, Grad Leaders, Simplicity, 1220, some of those other ones, what they do is basically provide job search, interviews, scheduling, technology to individual college career service offices. So if you go to XYZ school, you go to that career service office's website and you run a job search, you're actually searching Handshake or Grad Leaders or Simplicity or 1220 or one of those services. So those services are tied into career service offices. So the people who use them, the candidates who use them, tend to be the currently enrolled students at those schools, but nobody from any other school and virtually nobody who has already graduated from those schools. So it limits their audience. At College Recruiter, we've always been set up more like an Indeed or a traditional job board. Any candidate anywhere can come to our site, search all the jobs, apply to any. They don't have to be tied or related or have an affinity to a particular school, for example. What that means is that our audience can be a lot bigger because we can reach any student, any recent grad. So on a yearly basis, in terms of how big we are, we help more than 7 million students and recent grads a year find employment. We have at any given time, usually 1 million to 1.5 million active job postings, and we're global. A little over a year ago, about 1.5 years ago, we started to accept postings in any country worldwide. And by the end of the year, we'll have postings in certainly well over 100 countries, including at least 100,000 postings in all 15 countries where most people speak English.
Okay. What was I going to ask you? My question. Anyway, what mistakes do you think employers make today when it comes to recruiting students and grads? You've seen this, you've seen years of this type of effort to attract them, but what mistakes do they make?
Yeah, one of the mistakes that they make is that they are, especially the ones who are focused on on-campus recruiting. This is not all of them, but it is too many of them. They're focused too much on the process and not on the outcomes. So what I mean by that is a lot of employers that are specifically targeting college and university students and recent grads equate the school and the major with quality. And the data shows it's just not the case. Now, certainly there are some majors that are required in order to be in that profession. So you want to be a nurse, you have to have a nursing degree. You want to be a teacher, other than now apparently in Arizona, you have to have an education degree. You want to be an engineer, you have to have an engineering degree. So, hey, if you're recruiting engineers, it does make sense that you're going to be looking at engineering majors and not fine arts. But for almost every job out there, your major is actually pretty irrelevant. Employers have come to understand that soft skills are far more important than hard skills. Ernst & Young years ago, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, one of the top recruiting people there, they were quoted as saying that we can teach you how to read a balance sheet, but we can't teach you how to think critically. Well, do you know who does teach you how to think critically? Your liberal arts or fine arts or whatever undergraduate program. You spend 2 years or 4 years learning how to think critically. And so the smarter, the better employers like the Ernst & Youngs of the world, they look at those students and they're looking at is this person likely to be productive? And they're not using proxies like, did they happen to go to Carnegie Mellon? Did they graduate with a computer science degree? The better employers now are far more interested in, oh, okay, you're applying to be a software engineer with us. Show me some of the work you've done. Have you and your buddies built an app so that you can beat everybody at fantasy football? If so, you're of a hell of a lot more interest to us than somebody who got a bunch of A's on exams. Because we're going to be paying you to build apps. We're not going to be paying you to take tests.
Do the students know that? I was talking to my daughter.
No, no,
Okay.
they don't.
She doesn't. She thinks like she's so focused on like, I have this degree, I have to get this type of job. And I'm trying to explain to her that no, it's not the case. They just want to know if you graduated and if that's basically what they want to know.
But yeah, and the reason they don't know that is because the organization that they would most trust to teach them that would completely undermine your business model. So how does a university go to you and say, hey, you've been grossly overpaying for what you're getting from us for the last 4 years? Just ignore all of that and just chalk that up to, we taught you how to think critically, and now go out and get whatever kind of job you wanted. No, they have to sucker you into the whole, you need to go to the best school possible, which you actually shouldn't. Go to the school that's the most competitive for you to get into. You need to have the best grades. You need to have this and this and this and this. And no, you don't. Now, if you are looking for a job as an investment banker on Wall Street, yeah, you do need to do that, because those sorts of organizations are still so tied into the whole prestige thing that they're just not going to consider somebody from flyover country or somebody who graduated with a fine arts degree from, a school in rural North Dakota. They're just not going to see you as being up to snuff. You probably are up to snuff, but they're not going to see it that way. The vast majority of students take jobs after graduation, their first or second job after graduation, in a career field which is unrelated to their major. And the school that they went to is quite literally irrelevant to the vast majority of employers. The employers want to know, are you college educated? And that's about it for the vast majority of roles. So I think that today's students are paying far more than they need to, and they're far more stressed than they need to be. But fortunately, we're seeing, I think, prompted by COVID, partly by George Floyd and the desire by employers to diversify their workforces, we're seeing a real emphasis, increased emphasis by employers on productivity, on hiring who they think is going to be the most productive, rather than what is the name, what's the print on your diploma.
Yep. All right, Steve, we'll talk with Stephen Rothberg from collegecareer.com, of course. Let's turn the tables a bit. If you were starting a college recruiting function today instead of a large employer, how would you set that up? And tell me about the strategy you implement to hire those folks.
Yeah, so I wouldn't set that up. So I'll push back on you that way. Okay. If I was working for, say, a Fortune 1000 company, a government agency, some employer that's hiring at scale, I would not actually create a college recruiting function. And if I came in there and there was a college recruiting function, I would get rid of it. What they should have is an early career or early talent function. And that, simply by naming it that way, and then setting up the goals or the rocks for that organization, you inevitably de-emphasize the school, you de-emphasize the major, and you start to become more inclusive of people like military veterans, people who went to boot camps, people who graduated from high school without good grades, without good standardized test scores, but who are just fantastic at software development or architecture, or something, whatever it is whatever that skill it is that you're looking for. If you are CarMax, big car dealership company, and you're hiring thousands of college students and recent grads a year to work as mechanics, to work as salespeople, et cetera, why do you care what school that person went to? Why do you even care if they went to college? You should be hiring them based upon what they're likely to do for you. And you shouldn't have to anymore look at the school or the major as a proxy. You can use assessment tests. There are plenty of really good ones out there. You can build one on your own for very little money. You're looking to hire a mechanic, bring somebody in and have them do something for 15 minutes. It's like, do you know how to change a spark plug? Well, I don't. And they'd see that very quickly and they'd say, get the hell out of here. But, Chris, if you know how to change a spark plug and you can tell them, oh, on this car, this is the catalytic converter and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I can see that you're probably well qualified to be a mechanic. What difference does it make if you went to school for that or not? If you know how to do it, you should be able to do it. If you were in the Army for 4 years and working in the motor pool, wouldn't they rather hire you than if you just went to some trade school for a year and never actually had done the job other than outside the classroom? So I think that we're starting to see this with more organizations. It's a rapidly increasing minority of organizations are renaming their college or university recruitment departments as something to the effect of early career, early talent. And I am really excited about that. I think it's going to lead to much better matches between the organizations and the candidates.
Yeah, pretty cool. I think you're right there, right on the mark. Last question, Stephen. Tell me the last client you talked to who made a hire through your site, and what kind of job was it?
So we tend not to get hire data, conversion data along those lines back from our employer customers. Some of them will share with us, it's probably about 50-50 now. They'll share with us conversion data, meaning the clicks, the candidates that we send to their ATS who convert into applicants.
Yep.
And some of those will share with us what their cost per hire is. But I don't remember the last time any organization that we worked with would have come to us and said, we just hired a person from you. Now, why? One of the reasons for that is that we work almost exclusively with employers that hire at scale. And because of that, we're working usually through an advertising agency, a job distributor, a programmatic specialist within the company. We're rarely working with a recruiter or with a hiring manager. They're not coming to our site and posting a single job and then seeing that they got 20 applications and then hired one person. Instead, we're getting feeds or we're scraping thousands of jobs, sometimes tens of thousands of jobs. And so they're looking at the data in aggregate. But success story. So one of the success stories that we've had over the years, I think we've been working with them for about 15 years now, is one of the big US intelligence agencies. And they are only allowed to hire US citizens. And it's for, security clearance reasons. And they have a very strong preference for hiring diverse candidates. It can be women, it can be people of color, transgender, et cetera. The reason is that they hire enough people and they have enough analyst teams that years ago, they did a whole bunch of A/B testing and they could see that the more diverse the analyst team, the better the results they got was. Who can predict which analyst team was better able to predict the Iraq war or some civil unrest in Nigeria or whatever. And they would have multiple analyst teams working on the same problems. And then they would look back, who got it right, who got it wrong. And over and over and over again, it was the more diverse the analyst teams, the better the answers were. And what they use us for is to reach out to usually diverse, again, people of color, people, LGBTQ, female, et cetera, people with technical skills who are US citizens and who speak at least one quote unquote foreign language, non-English language. So, when you see some of these requirements come through, they have to go to any one of these 18 schools and have a computer science or engineering background, be a US citizen and speak Farsi, Urdu, Pashto, Korean, or Chinese. And you're like, who are these people? What it is it's a lot of them are second generation. A lot of them are the children of immigrants. And the immigrants themselves largely are very grateful to the country, and they've raised their kids to want to serve the country. And some of those students or some of those young adults will go into the military, and some of them will go into intelligence agencies. So on a yearly basis, we help that one intelligence agency hire thousands of people. That's a big success. We also have clients, some of them probably are your clients too, Chris, other job boards that will buy traffic from us or sell traffic to us. And what we see there is much more transparency, much better data sharing. What is your effective cost per application is sort of typically what the metric is. We definitely have some customers that our traffic is too expensive, but the vast majority of them we're sort of at or below average in terms of cost when you look at what's the effective cost per application, which, you know, in the programmatic job board world, that's kind of the currency. It's not so much what you pay per click, it's what does that back out to? How many of those clicks turned into applications? What did you have to pay for that?
You have a sense of what that number is, roughly?
It varies considerably, country to country, region to region, and occupational field to occupational field. But for example, I think like retail in major urban areas in the US, I think last month was something in the $15 range.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, I appreciate the conversation today, Stephen. I learned a lot, and the audience did too. And it's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Be well and enjoy the rest of the summer.
All right, sounds good. That will do it for this episode of the RecTech Podcast. Be sure to follow us on the socials, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, via the @RecTech media handle. See our podcast, but a blog we publish. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, always be recruiting.